Looking for trusted vehicle protection? American Guardian Warranty Services has you covered. Since 1998, we've delivered top-tier coverage, award-winning support, and industry-leading training to keep your business moving forward. Every way forward.
Welcome to Daily Drive for Tuesday, July 8th, 2025. I'm Jake Neer in Detroit, in for Jamie Butters.
And I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. Today on the show, Ford drops employee pricing for all, pivoting to new deals. The end of EV incentives forces Nissan to delay the launch of 2 models. And NHTSA opens a recall probe into more than 1 million Ram trucks. Plus, our own Molly Boygon joins the show to talk about the likely impacts of the new U.S. spending law on the auto industry.
The message has been crystal clear and consistent across the branches of government that support for EVs is being reduced or eliminated. And perhaps now automakers can kind of take stock and try and figure out what to do next.
Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up in the auto industry.
Ford is starting the third quarter with a new incentive campaign after 3 months of employee pricing discounts boosted its market share. The automaker said today most Ford and Lincoln models now offer no-interest financing for 48 months, with no money down and no payments required for the first 90 days. Rob Caffel, Ford's director of U.S. sales and dealer relations, said in a statement that the company believes customers want lower upfront costs. The new campaign begins after Ford's U.S. sales rose 14% in the second quarter, resulting in a market share gain of 1.8 percentage points. In the first half of 2025, the Ford brand outsold both Toyota and Chevrolet to become the nation's top seller. You can find more details, including which models are excluded from the new program, at autonews.com.
Nissan is telling suppliers it will postpone the start of production of 2 electric crossovers at its plant in Canton, Mississippi by nearly a year. It's the latest in a series of electric vehicle delays by the automaker. It comes 3 days after President Donald Trump signed a budget bill ending tax credits designed to encourage electric vehicle adoption. A Nissan-branded crossover, codenamed PZ1K, will now begin production in November 2028. A related vehicle for the Infiniti brand, codenamed PZ1J, is scheduled to begin in March 2029. In a memo, Nissan pinned the delay on, quote, recent slowing EV demand in the U.S.
NHTSA is opening an investigation into nearly 1.2 million Ram trucks that had all been repaired following 2 previous recalls in 2017 and 2018. The 2 previous recalls addressed the brake transmission shift interlock locking pin becoming stuck. The issue allowed the transmission to be shifted out of park without the vehicle having a key in the ignition or the driver pressing on the brake pedal. NHTSA says it could result in the vehicle rolling away. In a statement, a Stellantis spokesman said the automaker was cooperating with NHTSA.
And General Motors' former North America chief has landed a new position in the auto industry. Marisa West will lead North American operations for French supplier OP Mobility as executive vice president and chairperson of the region. She also will serve on the company's executive committee. West was previously at GM for more than 2 decades, leading its Canadian operations before spending less than a year as its North American president. She abruptly left the automaker in August 2024. And those are today's headlines. Coming up, we'll dig into the likely impacts of President Trump's spending bill on the industry with our own Molly Boygon. That's next on Daily Drive.
Daily Drive listeners like you have access to the lowest price for Automotive News Congress 2025 on September 11th.
The event is where the industry's biggest players tackle its toughest challenges. Congress attendees don't just follow the industry, they lead it.
This year's featured speakers include Hyundai Motor Group Executive Chair Yusin Chung and General Motors CEO Mary Barra.
We are investing in America. We're creating jobs. That's creating IP in this country. And I think, the United States needs to lead in key technologies.
Join us to gain the insights and connections needed to steer your business through massive change.
To get the lowest price for the event, go to autonews.com/events, select Auto News Congress, and type in the discount code Daily Drive, one word, all caps. We'll see you in September in Detroit.
When it comes to vehicle protection, American Guardian Warranty Services has you covered. Since 1998, AGWS has been a trusted leader in F&I solutions, offering top-tier protection plans for autos, RVs, power sports, marine, and more, all backed by A-rated insurance carriers for reliable coverage you can count on. But we don't just offer protection. We deliver results. With award-winning marketing materials, expert dealer training through AGWS University, and exceptional customer service, we are committed to helping your business grow while keeping your customers protected. Join thousands of satisfied dealers and agents who trust AGWS for comprehensive coverage and unmatched support. Visit agws.com or call 800-579-2233 today to keep your business moving forward. Every way forward.
Welcome back to Daily Drive. I'm Jake Neer with Kellen Walker. The new budget bill marks an end to many Biden-era incentives and parts of his signature legislative achievement, the Inflation Reduction Act. It comes on the heels of other Trump administration actions to eliminate federal support for electric vehicles, including the end of California's strict vehicle emission standards. Automotive News staff reporter Molly Boygan has been covering the law's journey through Congress and reaction from the auto industry. I reached her in New Hampshire. Molly Boygan, welcome back to Daily Drive.
Thanks for having me, Jake.
All right, so we've been saying big, beautiful bill for a long time now. We can't really say that now, right? It's now an act. It's not really a bill.
That's right. It's been signed into law for those Schoolhouse Rock fans in the audience. It is no longer a bill.
So break this down for us. Obviously there's the auto-specific parts of this, and then there's the things that a lot of other people are talking about too. But for you, what are the most important parts of the bill impacting the auto industry?
There are several provisions of the now law that relate to the automotive industry. So probably the headline that people have been reading is related to the end of electric vehicle tax credits. So the $7,500 individual EV tax credit for new vehicles and the $4,000 used EV tax credit are both going away after September 30th, 2025. That's one big item. Another is that the budget bill eliminates fines for automakers who do not meet the CAFE standards, emission standards. Another one is that people can now take a tax deduction on auto loan interest up to $10,000. There is a change to tax credits impacting the vehicle supply chain. So the Inflation Reduction Act had established 45X, which is a tax credit for battery component manufacturing. And now there are pretty significant restrictions on entities that can claim the battery component manufacturing tax credit. So that's the long story long about what is impacting the auto industry in the bill.
So, we've been hearing lots of reactions for the bill in general, but what about from the industry? How are people, executives, analysts responding to this?
This is certainly not a surprise. The Trump administration has been fairly vocal in terms of its objection to federal support for electric vehicles. I would say that there has been some surprise about the speed of the end of the individual EV tax credit. This is something that the manufacturers and the dealer communities acknowledged was playing an important role in incentivizing electric vehicle adoption. And the companies that invested heavily in EV technology, the dealers that have invested heavily in charging infrastructure on their dealer lots and in marketing and in education. As we've talked about before on this podcast and in other contexts, the industry moves slowly. There's a lot of long-term investment and planning that's being done. So to have the credit phase out in September is a pretty quick turnaround. NADA highlighted during a June conversation with Automotive News that there are 140,000 electric vehicles on dealer lots at this point. So, analysts say that there's going to be a pull through. People are going to try and purchase vehicles before the end of the tax credit, but it's definitely an important factor for consumers that leaves a lot unanswered about EV adoption in this country.
What do you think this means, sort of broad strokes, for the EV transition, if there still is an EV transition? And that's sort of the question. Is this a death knell for that EV transition, or is this more of a speed bump, maybe a more major speed bump for that, as the industry figures out what to do with all these investments that they've made?
The folks that I've spoken to in the industry say that it's more of a speed bump, to borrow your analogy. This is a global industry. If you look at the competition that the domestic auto industry has, not only with Europe, but with China, electric vehicles and EV technology and battery technology are a huge part of that. So, for example, I spoke earlier to Sam Fioriani from Auto Forecast Solutions, and he outlined how automakers domestically still need to compete with the global market.
Manufacturers will need to have EVs. If they are globally competitive companies, they're going to need to have the technology to play in Europe, in China, in other markets around the world. Other manufacturers who aren't in the US market are going to continue developing EVs. And so those batteries will get better. And if the incentives to build them in North America or in the US aren't there, they're going to lose competitiveness around the world.
So no doubt about it, it is a speed bump, also amounts to a significant test for organic demand. The industry will finally have an answer. How badly do American consumers actually want EVs when incentives go away and when the federal government support for electric vehicles goes away? So it'll be an illuminating time for the industry.
It's interesting because, you kind of, these are two separate issues in a lot of ways. But if you think about this alongside tariffs, we were hearing for a very long time that for automakers and for suppliers, the issue with the tariff discussion is how quickly it's changing all the time. So that there's sort of, the industry is paralyzed by that, or was paralyzed by that. With this, I guess at least there's some finality to it right now. Now we're at a stage where companies can start really making plans for at least the coming couple of years. In that case, is that a fair statement?
I think that's a fair statement. A lot of the actions that the government has taken to reduce federal support for EVs will probably last through the end of the Trump administration. Obviously, there's a question as to the next administration's actions on all of this stuff, depending on which way the election goes. And I will say that the way that the Congress approached the end of the EPA waivers that enabled the state of California to write its own vehicle emissions actually do open some executive actions up to congressional review. So that will be really interesting depending on what goes on in the midterms. But I would say, I do think that automakers sort of, again, expected that the Trump administration would do this. The message has been crystal clear and consistent across the branches of government that this is support for EVs is being reduced or eliminated. And yeah, perhaps now automakers can kind of take stock and try and figure out what to do next.
At least the policy is not going to change next week or tomorrow or something like that.
I would never say never, but I don't think so.
So there's another aspect of this bill that you've been paying attention to that I think is new for a lot of people, or that a lot of people, even in the industry, may not have been paying close attention to. And that's the moratorium on states regulating artificial intelligence. Whatever happened to that part of this bill? Explain what that is and what the outcome was.
Yes. So this was a very controversial part of the House bill, the original House bill that also made it into a version of the Senate bill that was eventually eliminated. So basically, the Congress suggested that states that regulated artificial intelligence would there would be an all-out moratorium in one version, or those states would be denied federal grants for broadband internet projects. And the concern was, at this point, the entities that are regulating artificial intelligence and therefore autonomous vehicles are the states. So, for example, if you look at the state of California, the agency that's been deciding the extent to which different robotaxi companies will expand is the California Public Utilities Commission. So there was a question, if that made it into the final version of the bill and became law, who actually was going to be regulating artificial intelligence, and whether states would be hamstrung in making laws and policies, as they have been, governing the deployment of autonomous vehicles, robotaxi, automated driving systems. So ultimately, that did not make it into the final bill. And states are allowed to continue to regulate artificial intelligence and therefore to regulate robotaxis. But that was sort of one thing that I was watching that went. Actually, I expected it to remain just because of how sort of friendly the federal government has been to artificial intelligence. And so that was a bit of a shift that was marked, in the later versions of the bill and ultimately signed into law.
And do you know if that has implications for things like Tesla's robotaxis plans, or the expansion of companies like Waymo and others that are really looking to get out on the streets and expand at this point?
Those companies are definitely aware of the administration's sort of friendly attitude toward artificial intelligence and toward automated driving systems. I would say that the way that the Congress went is more an indication of some awareness that we're in such early days. And really, as I said, the leadership on this issue has been taken by the states. I think that there was some genuine fear and hesitation about just not allowing states to be involved. So I do think in general, the tone of the administration is still so friendly that the companies are watching that and not taking a huge message from the elimination of that part of the bill.
Gotcha. All right. Well, hey, this is obviously a big bill, big act to
bill.
Unpack. And so we will have lots of unpacking to do in the coming days and weeks and months. But I know you'll be on top of it, Molly. Thank you so much for joining us here on Daily Drive.
Thanks for having me.
That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Jake Neer, in for Jamie Butters.
And I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to automotive news journalist Urvash Kakaria, Mary Corey, and Lindsay Van Hully for their reporting for today's podcast. You can get the latest news on U.S. legislation, tariffs, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com.
Come back tomorrow for a look at how Ford's head of manufacturing is transforming the company's culture one bus tour at a time. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.